And I'm gonna take on lesson 9. I'm gonna do a slow reading because lesson 9 is pretty. It's a little complicated, in my opinion. The diplomacy lesson. The questions that come out of it are not straightforward. So we'll just read lesson 9 slowly and discuss it.
Conference recording started.
Greetings, sisters. There's no brothers here. Tonight is December 7th, 2021, 8:23 p.m. This is the Dr. Julius Nairi CDPM training course open to all offices of UNIA-ACL. Brief roll call. Tonight on the call, we have myself, Brother John, Division 421. We have Sister Kay, Lady President for Philadelphia, Division 121. We have our Lady President for Division 421, Mama Mina. Our First Lady Vice President for Division 421, Sister Ra Ebony. And our Black Cross Nurse Coordinator for Division 421, Erica. Okay, got the description out. Here's the wrong page. Any questions or comments, anything anybody want to say before we get started? All right. So, recapping lesson 9. All right. Chaplain Mitchell, is that you? Give me 1 second, I'll find you. Brother James. Greetings, Brother James. How you doing? All right, so get right into the reading. So we're going to read lessons 9, 10, and 11 tonight, and we'll reread lesson 11 for next week, but there'll be no questions, no formal questions for tonight, but we'll have questions for lessons 9 and 10 next week, so be ready for that. All right. Lesson 9 is diplomacy, and one of the questions that I always ask is, what's the definition of that lesson? And so it's usually in the first paragraph, but I would ask, what is diplomacy? Diplomacy is a word used to express the peculiar relationship between nations. Diplomacy is the relationship that nations use to conduct their communications or approach in dealing with matters of state and to affect the relationship of a certain nature between them. In the broader sense, diplomacy means the thoughtful and careful consideration of words and ideas expressed to reduce the words and ideas to the level of being the least offensive while carrying the force of what is being desired to the maximum. In general, diplomacy is a relationship between nations, and it's the ability to express ideas that would reduce the consideration of words and ideas expressed to and it's a way of expressing ideas to be least offensive. But that's diplomacy in a sense. To be a diplomat, one has to be very careful in his expressions before indulging them. He must think seriously and calculatingly so that his thoughts and words may have the desired effect without arousing suspicion or inviting hostility. You must first be a skillful thinker and psychologist to be a diplomat. A diplomat never reveals his true state of mind. He never reveals his hand in dealing with a situation. He always keeps a line of defense or whatever he says or does in reserve. So these are characteristics of a diplomat. One thing to keep in mind as I read through this, and I read through this earlier today, and I want to just reiterate it. We gotta remember, a diplomat is a way of nations relating to each other. So you'll hear some things in here in regards to characteristics about not being honest or reserving your opinion. These are things that nations do amongst other nations, but these are not things that we should be doing internally within our own nation. So when Garvey talks about it's okay to lie, that doesn't mean inside of the organization. That means he specifically outlines it as in the position of a diplomat. So I want to keep that clear as well. There's a lot of things in here that we may disagree with, and it may not be good from a personal characteristic standpoint, but these are for diplomats, and these are for individuals communicating between nations. Okay. A diplomat never talks before he thinks. He thinks an idea over several times before he expresses it. The idea is that he must not be found wanting or on the wrong side of any question. If he is found on the wrong side, his efforts at diplomacy fail. He must be able to read other people's minds and intentions and use that knowledge to safeguard and protect himself and the interests he represents. A skillful diplomat is always master of the situation. He is able to fool or deceive others to gain his point. He never exposes himself to be taken advantage of. He always leaves a loophole for escape from danger or trouble. His language is always couched in a manner to carry weight in the particular direction, but at the same time not to be so offensive or revealing as to cause the person dealt with to immediately jump at conclusions by the completeness of the thought expressed. In fact, a diplomat always gives out expressions that carry double meanings or more than double meanings, so that if one interpretation is dangerous to affecting a good relationship, he can always fall back and say it was not intended that way. In diplomacy, if you mean to take advantage of the other person, never open a suggestion, but gauge your words most carefully to ultimately win that in view without expressing it in the wrong. A good way to get results is to actually feed your opponent with good words that mean nothing. And then when you come down to the business part, hold your ground, but still use good and pleasant words to win. Never approach anybody that you want to get anything out of or any good results from in an offensive manner. To the contrary, win them with the perfect smile in the most gentle manner. Do this even with your enemy, until your enemy has positively delivered himself and there is no alternative. Then show your hand. Never show your hand at the start. The idea is to make friends and to get results, rather than make enemies and lose results. This must be applied to all phases of organization work, dealing with the race and dealing with others of other races, and dealing with others of other races. It is said that a kind word turneth away wrath. It is good diplomacy. Even if a man is going to kill you by threatening you, it is best to smile with him before he actually carries out the intention, so as to prevent him from doing so by showing him a smile, rather than to suggest the gravity of your indignation, which will cause him to think that you are going to kill him first. Then he will surely kill you in self-defense, even though he first threatened you. Many a man has been killed when their assailant did not really mean to kill them, but only to bluff them. But in taking the matter too seriously and showing that he was going to do some killing too, he gets killed by the man protecting himself after his threat to keep from being killed. Never lose your head in dealing with a problem, because in doing so, you are bound to blunder and ultimately lose. If you are in an accident where you come face to face with death, don't lose your head, because you may need your calm and collective judgment to save your life. The moment you lose your head, you are taking chances. The odds are against you. Morally, a diplomat must be a scamp. That is, he must be a mental twister. He cannot deal with the affairs with a clean conscience because he is to anticipate the evil of other men's designs, because the world and mankind are immoral and dishonest in their behavior. He necessarily has to adopt such a method as to safeguard himself or his interests in such designs. Had to mute the lines, please. Okay. You cannot be a true Christian before the act, but become so afterwards by repentance, which is personal. If you are protecting the interest of others, you have to sink your own personality, but still recognize the fact that you are responsible to those others. Therefore, you have to adopt all the methods of diplomacy to protect others. Hence, you cannot do so with a very Christian soul, because most of the souls you are dealing with are corrupt. After you have dealt with them, you have won your point. After you have dealt with them and you have won your point, if there was any act that was immoral or crooked which enabled you to win your point, then pray afterwards for forgiveness, but not before. Be sure that the act is done and leave the act where it is, if it is in the interest of others. Then square your conscience with God. If the truth is going to affect your cause, then never speak of it, but go around it in every kind of ambiguous way to justify your lie to save the cause. If you have won your cause by a lie, then as early as possible try to make the cause right, but only after you have won, for no cause can continue successfully without righteousness of the thing from all your imaginative experience. Never give up in seeking support. If one logic fails, use another until you have talked out your opponent by semblance of justification. You may say, quote, "I don't mean so-and-so. It was not the way I intended it. I have a different idea entirely. You are misunderstanding me. You have a misconception of what I mean. You probably didn't hear me when I said so-and-so. I may admit that I was not clear enough, but I didn't mean what you say," end quote. Then be able to build up a new argument on that and let the thing that you are arguing about take a back seat, so that they will forget what you were arguing about and take you up on the other things you have said and make that the debate. Thereby, you leave the situation where it was for another time. Always try to lead the other fellow away from the true idea. If you are on the wrong side, build up a new argument and hold him on that until you have worn him out. Let him say this is not the argument, then still persist in something else. Always profess friendship from your enemy so as to disarm him. Never refer to him as Mr. Brown. Say, "My good friend, Mr. Brown. I cannot understand why my good friend is so opposed to me. I've always thought of him as a kindly disposed man and a very good fellow. But always watch him. Don't take any chances. Offer your gifts that you can afford to lose so as to win him like the Greeks bringing gifts. Your words must be formed and positive when you want to commit others. Your words must be formed and positive when you want to commit other people. For instance, do you intend to pay my money, end quote. Have you ever made up your mind to answer my letter, end quote. Always let it be a question that can be answered with a yes or no. Don't suggest to anybody in long sentences. When you want to commit yourself, do so in veiled language and never finally commit yourself until you are ready to close the matter. Always try to escape giving a yes or no to any question that is important. If you have to say yes or no, do so in long explanations so that you may escape out of the explanation from the positive answer. If trouble is involved, it becomes your defense. Always try to leave in your remark or words room for controversy or denial of meaning as decided on by the other party. When you want to protect yourself and trap the other fellow, Let him write you short sentences by leading him up to such a manner of reply. When you have to answer, make your sentences long and capable of taking many interpretations. If you want to close the matter directly to your interest, then clinch it by accepting his argument in short sentences that cannot be misunderstood in law or arbitration. When you are inviting explanations, make your sentences very short and to the point. When you are asked to give explanations, consider carefully if you should make your sentences long or short. Use discretion. Always allow the other fellow to talk first by leading him. Let him talk of everything in his manner so that you may know your man. Never let him lead you out. Always be reserved. In a word, be a good listener. Then you will have everything on the other fellow. Decide the situation and take action. To get a man to talk, offer him courtesy. Offer him a drink, a cigar, etc. Say, quote, "It is a beautiful day, isn't it?" End quote. Quote, "How have you been doing lately?" Quote, "Are you comfortable where you live?" And quote, "What do you think of so-and-so?" End quote. If he is reticent, you know you have a hard customer to deal with. Then find out his weakness by investigation, and when you find it, invite him back again and cater to that weakness. His weakness may be for ladies. Invite him to meet your best friend and get your friend to pump him and tell you what you could not get from him yourself. If you are dealing with the opposite sex, do the same thing. If he is addicted to drinking, give him a few drinks and let him talk. But you must not drink as much as he, otherwise you will be in the same position. Use your skill in letting him believe that you are drinking too, but don't drink. You cannot get him by himself. Get his friends to tell you all he knows about him. If the knowledge possessed by the person is important to you, never stop following him. If you have to go 6,000 miles directly or indirectly to get your information, if the knowledge you possess by the person is important to you, never stop following him, even if you have to go 6,000 miles, directly or indirectly, to get your information. You may get it through an agent, a neighbor, or a neighbor of his, or a person he does business with. Follow every clue of an association until you get your information about the subject. Never accept invitations from your enemies. Always find some excuses with kind thanks. If you have once injured a man, never trust him completely because he is always waiting for his chance to get even with you. Never talk your personal business or the business of your cause to a stranger. Tell him nothing until you know him sufficiently. Don't accept complete friendship on his first approach. Carefully find out if he is worthy of being a good and true friend. Otherwise, you may find yourself in the ditch. Never give valuable papers or anything of value to a first acquaintance or a cordial friend or neighbor to keep. If the documents are very valuable by the way of information, don't allow even members of your own household to keep them. Keep them secretly and privately because you don't know who may give you away, even innocently. There's always a third person in everybody's life. Be careful of that third person. That person may come between a man and his wife, a brother and his brother, a sister and her sister, a father and his children, a mother and her children. Remember, there's always a third person, and that third person may not like you very much. Always be careful of the second person, because the third person always comes in through the second person. You may quarrel with the second person, sometimes, and in the passion of revenge, which you may regret afterwards, the second person may reveal your secrets. Therefore, take your secrets to the grave and only let God know about them. Never lose your head and divulge anything that will mean trouble for you with the law. The person who has the secret may change his mind about you and turn you in, even after 20 years. Many people get into trouble without knowing where the trouble comes from. Sometimes it comes right from their own home, by talking too much in your own home, and by the circles in your home not appreciating your position. They innocently give the information out to other parties who are not interested in you, but are probably interested in seeing that the one you have offended gets justice. Therefore, the person prefers to see you hanged rather than see his friend whom you have injured go without justice because of what you might have done to that person in your secret. So that is diplomacy. That's a lesson on diplomacy. Again, we'll have some questions on it next week. But was there any comments, anything in regards to the reading on diplomacy tonight?
As this First Lady, Vice President, Sister Bright Ebony, and I just want to point out the irony. I might be going a little fast forward, but the irony of the passage and the death that occurred with him, because if you know the story about Garvey, when he died because of a publication that somebody else wrote about him, wrote him that he was already dead prematurely, and then he had a stroke and died after. So I mean, it's just it's just divine that he wrote this in his passages and how fate worked out. So that's different.
Thank you, First Lady, Vice President. Yeah, timing in regards to how Garvey passed, what he talks about, keeping secrets, between you and God. Yeah, excellent comment, First Lady, Vice President. Any other questions, comments on lesson 9 before we move to lesson 10? Okay, but yeah, lesson 9 is I don't know. It's not an easy lesson, but we have to take it in context again, and that's why I started with. I always start with the definition of what we're dealing with. So Garvey says diplomacy is a word used to express peculiar relationship between nations. So we should not be trying to use diplomacy within the organization on other members within the organization. Kind of what I wanted to say. Diplomacy is for nations interacting with other nations. So us as an organization, us as a government, interacting with other groups, other governments, other nations.
I was going to say, Brother John, give thanks for pointing that out and for, I guess reiterating that practice of diplomacy outside of our government and not within our government, and just to keep that in mind as we are officials, and sometimes to combat the old stigmas of the past issues that we might have transpired, and going into new effectiveness with an enlightened and more knowledgeable viewpoints of our positions, just to make sure that we are effective with not carrying out diplomacy within the government. So give thanks for that reiteration.
Ashe. But yes, again, that's why this course is for leadership only. I think some people, we may have been anxious to share this information, and some people that may have not been ready have taken the information and used it in the wrong ways. So that's why I stress the importance of what we're trying to be as far as leaders, and understanding the dynamics of how to do things outside of the organization, and then how to do things inside of the organization. So thank you, Sister Kay. Yeah, there is a little bit of deception, some aspects of deception in this lesson, but again, it's not to be used within the organization. This is nations interacting with other nations. Okay. We have questions on that.
I'm sorry. I was going to, most importantly, nations acting in objection and an offense to, or defense, I guess, rather, to our nation.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. Never mind. Continue, because I just lost my train of thought that fast.
No problem. Okay. It talks about weaknesses and taking advantage of people's weaknesses. This is not inside of the organization. So this lesson and a lot of these things, malicious intent. I don't even want to say that, but y'all know what I'm saying. This stuff is not for inside the organizations, outside.
Yeah, for those nations that are in opposition of our nation. That's what I was pointing out. The nations that are in opposition of our nations, those nations that are trying to oppress our nation. I'm assuming those nations is what I'm speaking reference to.
Thank you, Sister King.
Hey, Brother John.
Go ahead, Brother Everett.
Yeah, I was just going to say this lesson was a little powerful for me because just the fact that he's teaching this back then in that day and time. I mean, I can take these lessons. I can take especially this lesson if we're dealing, even if we're networking or going out to speak and work with other organizations, just how to play your role and sit back and listen. Don't say too much at first. You know how he's talking about, the drinking and don't drink. Let your man drink and run his mouth, so you know how to play him.
Yes, sir.
For your agenda. I just had to say that it's very powerful. This is a powerful lesson.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I agree with you, Brother Everett. And yeah, it's difficult for me to come up with questions for this lesson. But that's kind of why I wanted to read over it again. We've never read a lesson more than once. So this is the only lesson that we've read 2 times, and I think it's appropriate considering the context of when Garvey's saying what he's saying and the actuality of what he's saying. But we got to be careful. We got to be careful with this lesson and make sure we understand it and use this lesson correctly. But again, we'll have some questions on diplomacy next week. We'll be able to touch on it for a third time. But I think it's appropriate considering the context of what's being discussed. All right, it's 8:50. We wanted to read again. I started late today, so we're not going to have any questions today. We're reading lessons 9. We're going to read lesson 10, and I'm going to try to read lesson 11 tonight as well. Next week, we'll do questions for lessons 9 and 10, and if we have time, we'll read lesson 11 again. But right now, today, I'm trying to make sure we use the time wisely, time that we have, since I don't have questions. Okay. So this is lesson 10, economy. And again, like going back to, taking a step back and looking at the lesson, when you think about our people and organization, economy would probably be what most people would think would be the first lesson. That's what we always talking about is money, funding, resources. So it's interesting when you take a step back and look at this course as a whole, but we have to try to understand why economy was put at lesson 10, and try to understand, the flow of the lessons, what Garvey was trying to instill in the foundation in the first 7 lessons, and then, transitioning to the social system in lesson 8, diplomacy, lesson 9, and then we're getting into economy, lesson 10. Lesson 11, I want to say is man. We just check really quick. Man is that lesson 11, but just keep that in mind. We know how important economy is, but just think to ourselves, why did Garvey put this at lesson 10, and what was why did he consider the first 9 lessons to be to have priority over lesson 10? All right. With that, let me have some water and I'll get started. Lesson 10, economy. There are several kinds of economy, but this subject deals specifically with financial economy. Economy is based upon good and sane judgment. The practice of it is that you must always be on the safe side of your bargains or your dealings. Never exhaust yourself, always have a reserve. There should always be something left over that you may fall back on in time of need. Money is the prop of life, in that it pays for all necessities and offers security for all opportunities. In earning money, one should never spend as much money as he earns. That is bad business. Whatever his earning capacity, he should always be thrifty enough to save at least 15 to 20% of his income, storing it up for making better opportunities when they come, and providing for a rainy day. If you spend all you earn, you are on the edge of bankruptcy all the time. If you spend more than you earn, you are not only a fool, but you are a very dishonest person. You are bound to suffer without any other chance. Therefore, always make it a policy to save money out of your earnings, never mind how small it is. If you have better commercial ideas than your present job calls for, your present remuneration warrants. If you have better commercial ideas than your present job calls for and your present remuneration warrants, then save out of your present earnings to take advantage of the opportunity to improve yourself within a reasonable time in achieving these ideals. Never engage yourself in living luxuriously when you can only live ordinarily. Ultimately, you are bound to fail and be the laughing stock of your friends in the community by not being able to keep up the luxurious standards of living on a limited purse. Never buy anything for more money than you have or positively expect to have within the time limited for the purchase. Never give away money that you cannot spare. Never give away anything of value that can be turned into money except you can spare it. Never borrow on interest from anybody. If you can, within a reasonable time, pay your debts. If you pay your own debts with your own money, you will save the interest for yourself that you pay to others. The moment you start paying interest to others on money borrowed, you become a slave working for somebody else. It is better to wait until you have the money yourself to do a thing before you borrow it, to purchase that thing and pay interest on it. At the same time, you must use good judgment to find out whether it is to your advantage to seek an opportunity of doing something big with somebody else's money, even with interest to be paid. You must decide if the particular business will positively bring enough to meet the interest and give you sufficient profit to justify the risk you take in assuming the responsibility of paying interest to others may be of value. The moment you are loaned money on interest to do anything, the person loaning you money must be credited as being wise enough to know beforehand if more money can be made out of the thing or investment than only the interest. If it is so, it is likely that he himself will go into that business and not give you the chance to go into it with his money. He may be a friend and want to help you, but few money lenders are friends. They are lending for usury and have no souls. At least their souls are bad. So be careful in borrowing money to go into business. It is better you save and wait until you are able to go into business on your own account before you take the risk. It is bad business to go into any business without enough capital to run that business. 99 cases out of 100 will fail. Always consider costs before you go into anything, and in figuring out the cost, be sure that there is margin or profit before you do the thing. Otherwise, it is not worthwhile doing. If you are going to address a meeting 100 miles away, first count the cost of the railroad fare or transportation to and from, the cost of the meeting, your living expenses while going and staying at the meeting and returning from the meeting, the percentage to pay those who are looking after the meeting, and the prospect of getting a crowd large enough that will meet all these expenses and leave you with a profit of at least 25%. If there is no profit in it, you are taking a risk, and when you are finished, you will be sorry you went. Always work out beforehand the possible financial results of every transaction, and be sure that your arrangements are of such as to bring profit at the end. Otherwise, you are wasting time. As far as the UNIA is concerned, you should always calculate profit for the association in everything you do. Profit comes in many ways to the association. For instance, if you go down to address a meeting 100 miles away, profit will come by new members joining the association. The establishing of agencies there for the association, leaving behind the sentiments of the association, may be an advantage to any money you receive for the expenses of the meeting. As long as you have converted and attached someone permanently to the UNIA, that may be considered as profit. Always seek to get some profit. Otherwise, your work is a failure. When your work is to be judged, you will find that a balance sheet of how much you have received and how much you have dispersed as a representative of the association, and how much net you have turned into the movement, and how much morally you have helped the movement will be called for. If your balance sheet shows that for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, you have not added anything net to the association, your importance in it is nil. You will not account for much. Your status will be far below that of others who have been more valuable to the movement. A president or representative who can show that for the year he or she has turned over $500, $1,000, or $10,000 net to the association occupies a position of eminence that calls for the greatest recognition of service rendered. Another president or representative may occupy no such position of recognition because of his failure. Men and women are promoted on their record. Their record must be profitable. If their record is that of failure, they remain failures until they can prove otherwise. There is no other standard by which you can judge the ability of a man. Always seek to get substantial value for their work, because you will never be able to recall them as they move along. Whenever you want to sell anything, unless you meet somebody who is badly in need of that thing, you are always going to be offered less than the value of the thing. So never buy anything for its full value, otherwise you will have it at a loss. It is better to buy things for cash or in short term rather than on long term. A long-term purchase carries a greater percentage of interest on the purchase. Something that you purchase on terms can be bought at almost half the price if bought for cash, because people are also anxious to sell for cash, even though they make a sacrifice of the thing, because they want the cash. When you buy on terms, you must bear the burden. You must bear the burden, not the seller. When you buy for cash, the seller bears the burden in the loss to get cash. Always have cash, and bargains will always show up. If you have no cash, when you see bargains and want them, you pay twice the price for them when you buy them on terms. Never live above your income. Never live up to your income. Never assume responsibility when you're not prepared for it. It will burden you. Never marry broke. Never marry before you're ready. Never allow anybody to force you to do anything against your will. If you can see a thing and get good results from it at a cheaper price, don't pay a dearer price except you have money to throw away. Don't lose your head in thinking that something is going to run away. Therefore, you must grab it now. Following that attitude, you may find yourself to be a big fool, because what you grab here, thinking it is a wonder, you may find it thrown away next door, not worth anything. Always look around first when you are in doubt. Try to find the duplicate. You may come back to the first, but if a thing is in the neighborhood with one person, it is almost likely that a similar thing is also in the same neighborhood. Search the neighborhood first before you decide to lay all your money on one thing. Never think that one thing or that one person is the only peach in town. There may be better peaches on the tree. Try to curb your weakness for being a spendthrift. Every time you are tempted to spend 10 cents or $1 on a frivolous thing that you will not get any direct profit or return from, hold your hand, count to 10 before you do the thing. Say to yourself, quote, have I any other pressing need or use for this money better than this frivolous thing, end quote. There is always something else that you really need. Therefore, you will keep the money in your pocket. Never give your money away outside your race. If you are called upon to give it to God, ask yourself if God is really going to get it. Only when you feel that it is going into a channel that God will really appreciate himself should you give it. Because God himself doesn't want money, but a good cause in his name may need it, and you should first find out if there is really a cause. To send a man touring around the world in the name of God for his own pleasure is not giving to God. To give a man more worldly goods than he has already is not giving to God. To give to help carry on social service work in the community, or to help the poor of the community, or to rescue the children of the community is giving to God. If you have to be critical in giving to God, be even more so when you give to man. It must be for a good cause, and the nearest cause to you is the cause of your own race. Never fail to give charity where charity is needed within your own race, but don't allow yourself to be tricked. If an old thing is good, don't buy a new one. Don't follow fashion for fashion's sake. Follow your own judgment for intelligence sake. If nothing is wrong with your suit of clothes, don't buy a new one because someone else has done so. All it may need is attention, and so with everything. You may badly need the money later on that you may spend on a new suit. It is better to have the money than the thing, because when trouble comes, you can run with your money, but you may not be able to carry all the things. The largest sum of money can be carried in your pocketbook, while the weight of other things may cause you to wait for the next train, and by waiting, you may lose. Put your values more in money than in things. Only have those things that are necessary. If you have the ambition to be greater than you are, and you don't have the means to immediately do so, then practice rigid thrift in your present position by saving as much as you can, so that in a given period of time, you will be able to change your position to reach your objective. Never consume all you have and then expect to climb higher. It cannot be done. Never go into anything in business that you know nothing about. No fool can make a success of anything. Therefore, know your business before you go into it to make a profit out of it. Never live on the capital of your business. You must live on the profit. If you start to live on the capital, there will soon be no capital and no business. If you mean to stay in that business, whatever the profit is, live only on that profit and not on all that profit. Otherwise, the time may come when you have to live on the capital because you made no profit for that period. Business is only successful when you are making profit and not spending all the profit. Whenever an enemy or any person attempts to create prejudice against your organization with the government, take immediate steps to counteract the statement and reassure the government that you have no intention of doing anything not in keeping with the law. Always watch for this, because the government can easily outlaw your organization and curtail or prevent your activities. Therefore, don't join any movement that the government is not favorably inclined to tolerate, chiefly communism. Let the communists fight their own battles. Let other people carry on their own discord. Have nothing to do with them. The more they carry on discord and you keep away from it, the better it will be for you, because by keeping your head, you'll be able to see more clearly and get an advantage. Never let the government put you on the defensive. It will create prejudice against you. Keep out of court as much as you can. If possible, never go there except to do social service work to help others. Try to never be charged with a crime or to be on trial. It will affect the association and affect you. Always try to first settle racial disputes without going to the law. Law is expensive and uncertain. When you go to the law too often, you establish a bad record. And when anybody wants to know anything about you, particularly government officials, they can search the court records. Keep away as a defendant. Encourage the people to keep away and not waste their money in litigation, if their litigation can be settled by you or any responsible representative of the race. The people pay too many fines in court. The money they pay for fines could be used for the families in their own benefit. Always counsel Negroes to not be anxious to start litigations or to prosecute each other if it can be avoided. Going to court too often gives the race a bad name and causes the government to think badly of the race. Always try to impress the government that you are a law-abiding citizen so that when you make a request of the government, it may respect the request. Always keep your good work before the government and make the government aware of it, particularly social work, charitable work, educational work. This does not mean racial education. Your racial education is private, like the Jews. Make the government aware of all the public education tending towards good citizenship. It should prominently be brought to the attention of the government. And that completes lesson 10, titled Economy. I'll open the floor. Any questions, comments, statements in regards to what we just read?
Yeah, that was another powerful one, Brother John. It's just amazing how he breaks that down. I like how he also said it's not, how he breaks it down. Like it's kind of like teaching you how to manage your money personally, as well as, it's just deep. I'm just like really shocked at how he was saying all of this back then in those days and times, and how it's so relevant today. Save your money, save a certain percent of your money and stuff like that. That's really all I can say. It's just powerful.
Thank you, Brother Everett. Yes, I definitely agree. And it's interesting, these lessons, but he doesn't specifically say that, this is for an individual, or I don't know if he says for an organization, but it's implied. There are certain things that work well, whether it's individual or organization, and there's some things or habits that we should have as individuals that we should carry over into the organization. So excellent comment, Brother Everett. One thing that I thought of in relation to what Brother Everett was saying, in regards to the lessons, and this being lesson 10, as I was reading it, one lesson that kept coming to my mind is lesson 7, and it talks about character. But it takes a certain type of individual to be able to do these things, not living off of profit, saving, 15, 20%. They sound good, and they're just, directives, but if we don't have the character to carry them out, then they'll just be, suggestions. So that was one of the takeaways that I got was, in some of the later lessons, lesson 10 and so forth, there's implied characteristics of the individual and of the organization. And those are the things that we should have as part of our foundation, from the earlier lessons. But I just wanted to state that the underlying importance of character related to economy.
Brother President, in concert of what you're saying, that was an excellent statement that you made. Garvey got all of his consciousness from the Bible. So in the Bible, it teaches he was in his God self. And, in his teachings, he refers to a lot of things from the Bible. So, in the Bible, it tells you to be a good steward just over your money. And the Bible tells you, be slow to speak and be quick to listen. You know what I mean? So he really embedded himself in the Jesus Christ consciousness. So, he was really in his godly self. But, nobody's perfect. Everybody has flaws. So, I say to you.
Shay, yes, excellent point. And again, going back to the foundation, lesson 1, intelligence, education, universal knowledge, and how to get it. Garvey recommended reading the Bible, every day. So, we have to have a good foundation and a good understanding of the first lessons to to help us get an understanding of Garvey's mindset in the later lessons and where this stuff is coming from. But excellent point, First Lady Vice President, Sister Wagner. Anybody else? Any comments on the economy? 12 after 9. If there's no comments or questions, I'll go into lesson 11. We'll try to knock that out briefly, and then next week we'll have questions on lessons 9 and 10. Anything on lesson 9 and close before we move to lesson 10? Oh, wait, lesson 10 before we move to lesson 11. Okay. See something. So this is from last week, but just to recap what we've learned, lesson 1. Lesson 1, intelligence, in my opinion, is being studious. Lesson 2, leadership, understanding that leaderships are inherently superior in some form or fashion. Aims and objectives of the organization, Black nationalism, elocution, how to speak, as well as underlying aspects of health. God, talked about we don't die, our bodies just transform, and our spirit lives on forever. Christ, the example in Christianity, the example of having our Holy Spirit of goodness in line with our mind, free will, but having those in line, and what the potential of that could do. Character, just the importance of not, I don't have my notes in front of me, but having the right type of character, not trying to fake who we are, and knowing that you in the long run, you won't be able to fake who you are. But I feel like these first 7 lessons are like personal development. All of these you can give these lessons in any type of course, and they can be applied to make the individuals better. Social system, diplomacy, this is where we start to get into roles, I guess. So what is the purpose of the social system? What is the purpose of society? What is the purpose of a diplomat and diplomacy and interacting between nations? Economy, the importance of financial assets, and always keeping a reserve. And now we're going to talk about man. It's been a while since I read this one, so I really don't remember what he was talking about. But let's just recap. 9:15. We'll go ahead and get started. Y'all can kind of, just listen along and try to find out what the hidden lesson in this one is. Lesson 11, man. Man, because of his sin, which caused him to have fallen from his highest state of spiritual cleanliness to the level of a creature who acts only for his own satisfaction by the gift of free will, must be regarded as a dangerous creature of life. When he wants to, he can be good. Otherwise, he is generally bad. In dealing with him, you must calculate for his vices and his damnable evils. He is apt to disappoint you at any time. Therefore, you cannot wholly rely on him as an individual. Always try to touch him with the hope of bringing out that which is good but be ever on your guard to experience the worst that is in him, because he is always in conflict with himself as between good and evil. With that, I kind of remember where this is going. Really quick, and then we'll go back to it. So in lesson 8, we talked about the social system, and we learned that society is made up of the individuals. And that's what lesson 11 is going deeper into, the individuals, men that make up the society. So we talked about how messed up the society can be and the social system, how messed up that can be. And lesson 11 talks about how messed up man can be. Man is, when man becomes organized, he becomes society. So these two lessons are related. Now that I read that intro. So lesson 11 is talking about men that make up society, that are in the world, not necessarily us, even though we do have these characteristics, but it's looking at man on the outside, the idealistic image of man, as well as the bestial image of man. All right. We'll continue. When he can profit from evil, he will do it and forget goodness. This has been his behavior ever since the first record of his existence and his first contact with his fellows. Cain slew Abel for his success. Jacob robbed Esau of his birthright, and down through the ages of human history, man has been robbing, exploiting, and murdering man for gain. Therefore, do not completely trust him, but watch him. When he is good, try to keep him good, although he may not always remain good. If he is bad, avoid him. If you have no business with him, to the extent of being too much in his company, if you have no business with him, to the extent of being too much in his company, always try to reform him and use good influence on him, because the hope of life is to produce a better man. The passion of man is in evidence everywhere. It revolts against perfection, kindness, and even love when it has a personal object to attain. We have heard and read of children murdering their parents for gain, and parents murdering their children in similar manner. We have heard of wives killing their husbands and husbands killing their wives for gain. This reveals how wicked man can be. When we discuss man, we discuss the creature and not the particular individual whom we know, love, and can trust. Man, therefore, is the abstract creature who is vile until we know him personally. I think that's a big takeaway from this lesson when we talk about man. Man, therefore, is the abstract creature who is vile until we know him personally. So Garvey has a default opinion on man until we know him. So it's a cautious approach, and I agree with it. Seek first to know him before you completely trust him, because you are apt to be disappointed. A man shakes your hand today, and tomorrow he is a chief witness against you for execution. What is it that caused him to do that? It is his vileness. Know it then that he is vile, and only when you know him sufficiently may you trust him as far as your judgment would dictate. He is apt to change on you, and probably at the psychological moment you need his help most. Therefore, in dealing with man, trust your own character and your own judgment more than depending absolutely on, for the most of the time, his advice to you is wrong and calculatingly so as to put you at a disadvantage. Hear everything from man, but do not believe everything until you have tested it for yourself. The history of the world shows that man has been the chief murderer or killer. He has killed more creatures than any other being. He plans his murders from which he may execute on individuals or on large groups of men, and he generally does this for profit, national profit, racial profit, political profit, or economic profit. He is so vile that he no longer depends upon his physical strength to execute his vileness or to defend himself. He manufactures the most deadly weapons to do the deed quickly, while seeking self-protection from a similar attack. Therefore, contemplate the state of mind. Contemplate that he would calmly, coolly, and collectively invest an instrument or chemical purposely designed to kill his fellows at a point where they may not harm him to gain the property and possession. At a point where they may not harm him to gain the property and possession of his fellows. Can anything be more diabolical? No other animal sinks to this lower murderous level. Hence, man must be stripped of his veneer to see the evil machinations of his mind. The mind that makes TNT, the mind that makes mustard gas, the mind that invents the Krupp gun, the Winchester rifle, the fast-proof caliber pistol, and poisons, all calculated to kill his brother. Do you want anything more? Do you want anything more wicked? Now, can you realize how bad man is? If you do, then always be on guard, because you do not know when evil genius cometh. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. Therefore, know your man, so that even though he comes with a smile, find what is behind the smile. It is only a foolish man who accepts another at his word without finding out something about him. Never fall in love at first sight and marry at first opportunity. Never promise everything at the first request until you know the person is worthy of your promise. If you prize your own good fortune, never pledge it on the first approach of any man, but follow him, investigate him, and when his conduct coincides with what he states and what he promises, you may take the chance of trusting him just so far. As proof of this, there are more unhappy marriages than happy ones, although based upon the best promises at the start. There are more unhappy relationships between man than happy relationships, simply because the evil mind of man cannot keep good always. It is generally evil. This gives you sufficient evidence that man is vile and only in remote instances good. If you know it, then why take the chance of always believing before seeing? The taste of your pudding is the proof of it. Know your man before you believe. Never believe before you know. Always let your mission be to make man good. Therefore, talk to man always from the loftiest pinnacle. You may convert somebody, you may turn a vile man good, and if you succeed in doing this, even one instance, you have accomplished a great work. Leadership in good character must sacrifice to raise men from the lowest depths, but it is blind foolishness to sacrifice more than necessary. Therefore, redeem the man with the least amount of harm to yourself. Education. The present system of education is calculated to subjugate the majority and elevate the minority. The system was devised and has been promulgated by agents of the minority. This system was carefully thought out by those who desire to control others for their benefit and to the disadvantage of others, to the extent that others would not immediately rise into happiness and enjoyment of life simultaneously and equally with them. It is never originally intended to make all the people equal at the same time. Even more so, it was intended to elevate the darker races to the immediate standard. Was it not intended to elevate the darker races to the immediate standard of the white races? The minority sprung from the white race to establish the system of education. Therefore, all textbooks and general literature are colored to suit the particular interests of those who establish the system of education, and the group they represent as against the interests of others whom they did not want to immediately elevate to their standard. There is always a limited process in the education of others. There's always a limited process in the education of other races by the race that originates the system of education. As for instance, if a Negro attends a university with other students of the race that originated or projects the educational system, while the Negro would have the privilege of the classroom for general instructions to learn commonly, he may not have the privilege of his fellow students of the race whom may be admitted to certain club fraternities within the university from which he would be debarred. Such fraternities generally enjoy the privilege of special instructions and special discussions, which convey a larger range of enlightenment on the subject taught than would be possible to the Negro. Hence, when he graduates from the same textbooks, his technical knowledge is not as wide as that of others who have had fuller explanation in the technical interpretation of the particular books, and at the same time is only trained to reflect a system that props the intentions of the creators of the system, so that at his best, he who is making use of his education is a slave to a system that was intended for him, but to which he renders service. Therefore, it is necessary for the Negro to be additionally educated or re-educated after he has imbibed the present system of education. The way to do this is to educate him racially in the home, meeting hall, or his home club, where he will be put under the closest scrutiny and analysis of what appears to be education as coming from other people, because their system of education may not completely fit into the Negro's ideas of his own preservation. By not being able to do this in the past, educated Negroes have not been able to assume proper leadership of their race, because their education was of the nature to cause them to support the present system, which is of no advantage to the Negro, except as a servant, serf, and slave, for which purpose really the system was devised to a certain extent. This explains the behavior of leading Negro intellectuals who are not able to dissect the educational system of others and use only that portion that would be helpful to the Negro race, and add to it for a complete curriculum that would be satisfactory as a complete education for the race. Do not swallow wholly the education system of any other group except you have perfectly analyzed it and found it practical and useful to your group. There is still room for the educational system, free from the prejudices that the present educational system upholds against him. Never fail to impress upon the Negro that he is never thoroughly educated until he has imbibed racial education. I don't know what that word means. Somebody can find it out. Imbibed. I'll look it up later. It is by education that 929. Let me see. Imbibed. It is by education that we become prepared for our duties and responsibilities in life. If one is badly educated, he must naturally fail in the proper assumption and practice of his duties and responsibilities. The Negro fails in the proper assumption of his duties and responsibilities because he has been badly educated. He has universally failed to measure up to his duties and responsibilities as a man and as a race. His education has been subversive. He must now make his education practical and real. Hence, he must rearrange everything that affects him in his education to be of assistance to him in reaching out to his responsibilities and duties. As you shouldn't expect another man to give you clothing that you need to cover your own body, so you should not expect another race to give you education to challenge their right to monopoly and mastery, to take for yourself that which they also want for themselves. If you are going to distrust the other man in his honesty because you know him to be dishonest, you must maintain the attitude in every aspect, in every respect. For if he is dishonest in one, he may be dishonest in all. If he will rob you of your wages, he will also rob you of your education that will enable you to know that he is robbing you of your wages. Trust only yourself and those you know and those who look like you. Those who look like you are related to you. Those who look like you and are related to you ought to be the first before you know others. There may be grounds for a common education of all groups in a community, such as a civic education, political and social education, but this detailed education that teaches man how to live in the highest and enjoy the best is particular education, and that particular education is always reserved for those who want to gain an advantage. Therefore, in no other way in particular, secure education and have your own, such as the Jews who have outside of any common education, a particular and peculiar education of their own, which augments or adds to or modifies the common education that they have gathered in the community with others. By the view of the fact that the Jew gets a dual education, the education of the state and the education of his race, he is always in a unique position to worsen or to better his compatriots of another race in the community. He is always making more out of everything than the Gentile because he knows all about the Gentile, while the Gentile knows nothing about him. So that completes lesson 9, titled Man. It's 9:31 right now. I know we're a little bit over. That's what I say. Oh, lesson 11. Sorry, lesson 11, Man. So we read lesson 9. I know lesson. So that was lesson 9. Lesson 11. Lesson 9 was diplomacy. 10, economy. And 11 is man. A couple minutes. We only had a couple minutes, but I'll go ahead and stop and open it up for any questions, comments.
Sister Raven, I give thanks for these lessons tonight, and I just want to reiterate on Gordy and what you said earlier, and what I heard you say before, at one of our meetings, President John. At one of our at the last event, you had mentioned something about it starts at home, meaning that it starts, within yourself. Garvey always speaks about being of good character, being of integrity. That's why he points out so much about how to be in good character so much. And then we get to this subject of man, and he explains why. He goes off into why you should be of good character. When he explains what man is, he says a man is vile, a man is he's of evil. He has evil thoughts first before he is of good. And if you can turn a evil man good, you have done great work. So I appreciate Garvey for going into depth about being in good character. I appreciate Garvey for reiterating what the Bible says, because the Bible is about a consciousness, how to not die so early, not die in vain, not leaving a good legacy. The Bible talks about when you do good works, that people will build statues in your favor. So it all just adds up. And he talks about, he made my grandmother used to tell me, I used to hear my grandmother say all the time, I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. and that's what basically, in that chapter, in Man, that's what he was talking about. You get to know them, then you trust them as far as what you know about them. I used to say, I trust you to know what I trust to know what you're going to do, because I have been to know you. Okay, well, that person does this well, or that's not his strongest suit, and you don't use, but that's what you take upon that person and their statistics of their, of themselves. That's what they're capable of. That's what they're not. That's not their strongest point. So I give thanks for this.
Thank you, First Lady, Vice President. Couple things I wanted to say. I wanted to. I didn't want to. I'll go last if anybody else wants to say anything. Okay. Couple things that come to my mind as I was reading this, and I'm glad we kind of read these together. But one thing that jumped out is, and we've talked about it before, but I want everybody to be aware of it, is Garvey's respect for Jews, is the way I would put it. But at the end of this chapter, he says, by the way of the fact that the Jew gets a dual education, have your own such as the Jews. That's at the end of Man. And at the end of the previous lesson, let's see, go slowly. He talked about Jews again. Always keep your good work before the government, make government aware. This does not mean racial education. Your education is private, like the Jews. So I'm not Jewish or anything, but I do, I respect religion. But I understand Jewish religion. But Garvey was trying to create something globally for the entire race that could function, similar to how the Jewish religion function, to where, they're Jews first. You know, they do things. They come out of their homes and their businesses, and they interact with, you know, the people in the world, but they always know who they are, and they always know who to support first, and it's their people. So that's one thing I wanted to share with everybody, and I want everybody to think about it, because from the introduction, you know, through several lessons, Jews keep coming up. Communism has come up a couple times, but Jews has been a repeating theme. And other thing I want to say in regards to the lesson on man, this was an interesting lesson. The way it starts out, where it just talks about man and how he basically, I mean, it makes it seem like man has no hope. You know, like we're evil, vile individuals. We're going to do what we got to do to get ahead. So as I'm reading it, I'm also kind of thinking like, so what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, how are we supposed to create an organization of these individuals? You know, if we know what these individuals are, you know, capable of or thinking on a natural basis. But for me, the good news, the gospel came in the second half, where Garvey talked about education, and specifically one thing that we have to fall back on in the United States, and I guess we have it globally, but he talked about how minority does things to keep power over the majority. So although we are in this state that we're in, part of it is due to those that are in charge and the education that we've been, quote unquote, education that we've been given, and how we've been taught to be a certain way. And specifically, and he doesn't mention this, but it's something I've thought about, but in capitalism, you know, one general theory of capitalism, there has to be a winner, there has to be a loser. You know, so if you have an education system where you're teaching someone to be okay with being the loser, that would allow a system like that to perpetuate. And I think that's what Garvey was saying in the second half was, you know, when he talked about the person that steals from you is not going to teach you how to count so that you know that they're stealing from you. So, you know, that aspect of education and us teaching ourselves and us knowing what's best in regards to education. Because in America, a lot of our education just comes down to managing someone else's profits, you know, but that doesn't necessarily, you know, a conservative mindset, someone that's trying to maintain their wealth has a different education than someone that's trying to acquire wealth, you know. So those are my thoughts, those are my comments. I know it was a little bit long-winded. Anybody have any closing?
Hey, Brother John, I wanted to get your input and piggyback off of what you said. You might have said it, but it was a quote that he said. I think you said it, but I'm not sure. Going on the lines of what you said, and I want to try to remember this when he said, "Man will never teach you because you'll know that he's stealing from you." Is that what you just said? But that was powerful what you went into. I just wanted to get that correct.
That was Garvey. That was Garvey. I'll try to find it. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I thought that was very powerful when you read that. I think that was something that we need to really look in as a nation. Like, you know, we're learning from these people. We're in their system, but they're not really going to teach us everything. You know, he's kind of nailing that over. You know how he's saying that, you know, how their schools have more detail than our schools, how they get more you know, quality and stuff like that. So he's never going to teach us anything because we'll find out that he's robbing us, that he's getting the best of us in the system.
Yeah, Garvey said on page 98, if he will rob you of your wages, he will also rob you of your education that will enable you to know that he is robbing you of your wages.
Yeah, that's it. That's awesome. That's powerful.
That's the system that we're in, and we, steadily looking to these people to give us an education that will allow us to liberate ourselves. Like that's almost insane to have that, to think that would happen. But all right, 42 minutes after, so we're 7 minutes after, we're 7 minutes over. Any questions, comments, anything before as we move to close? Okay. All right. We'll be back next week. Should be on time next week. We'll have questions for lessons 9 and lesson 10, I believe. And then we'll probably read lesson 11 again, just to get us back on track. But I want to thank everybody.
Are we still going to do?
Go ahead,
President Jones. Are we still going to practice Kwanzaa on that first day? That's for the last Sunday of the month. We need to plan for it.
We do. Yeah, we do. We're supposed to have yes, we need to put something together. We should. Okay. Everybody should have some time blocked out for that already for what would have been our normal mass meeting, fourth Sunday mass meeting. But we'll move the time and try to invite everybody else to a different event.
Okay.
I was going to share with you, President. I'm sorry. I was going to share with you. I'm still going to share with you. My organization, my nonprofit Assist Group, is having a Kwanzaa week where we're doing something every day of the week for each category. And I wanted to ask if I could, if I could mention the UNIA on our flyers. Not saying that it's the organization's event where we have to pay for it. It's just a part of it. But we're having something every day of the week for Kwanzaa, and we're doing like raffle tickets. We're gonna give them. What you say, Mama?
So hold on, wait.
Let me. It's a 7-day holiday, and it's a 7-day event. We're supposed to celebrate every day. That's good. That's what you're doing.
Sisters, can I close out the meeting and allow our guests to close out the evening, then we can continue the discussion.
Okay.
So we'll close out really quickly. Motto of the organization. Everyone, please repeat after me. One God.
One God.
One God.
One aim.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Africa for the Africans.
Africa for the Africans.
Africa for the Africans.
Those at home and those abroad.
For those at home and those abroad.
For those abroad.
Grace first, family.
Grace first, family.
Mama Amina, Sister Rodney, we can stay on.
Okay.
Mama Mina, I really need to get